Well, former President Trump is still leading in the polls against Kamala Harris in the elections that the US will have later this year in November. And the question that we're asking today is how will Trump's 2.0 affect African economies? We know that Donald Trump was the president of the US from 2016 to 2020. And during that time, we saw a lot of changes different from President Obama. And one thing that President Trump is very keen to reintroduce is the American First policy. The America First policy basically is the policy that puts America's interest before the interest of any other country. And by that, Trump wants to increase 10% of taxes on all imports that will be sent to the US. Kenya is a major trading partner to the United States in Africa. In fact, the US is the largest trading partner of Kenya among other trading partners that Kenya has. And Kenya exports tea and many agricultural produce, including coffee, to the United States. By an increase of 10% of the produce that Kenya will be exporting to the United States, that means that there will be reduced competitiveness of the Kenyan market to the United States. It means that if there will be any other simple or cheaper produce that Americans can get within their country or outside, they will prefer that against the Kenyan produce that will be more costly compared to what it is right now. As well as there will be a decline in export revenue. That means that the people who are involved in businesses that are trading with the United States, that are exporting from Kenya to the United States, will see a reduce in their export revenue. And that means that their profit margins will be slimmer, and also that will translate to employment, where employment will be negatively affected. So people who are working in industries that are exporting from Kenya to the United States will be affected should President Trump get into office and effect the America First by a 10% increase in imports to the United States. Again, there will be geopolitical tensions. Of course, Trump being Trump will stir up the entire world, as he did with China in the last regime. He had trade wars with China, war of words with North Korea, war of words with Russia and the European Union. So Africa is very vulnerable to any geopolitical tensions, and geopolitical tensions negatively affect Africa because Africa needs to trade with both China, the United States, the East, the West, and whatever country that can be available for trade. So geopolitical tension basically will restrict Africa to trade with only one side and pick a side that they can rely on. So having our hand fixed on which side to pick on is a negative or a disadvantage to Africa and will affect the growth and the GDP and the economies of Africa. As well as Trump is not a believer of climate change. He specifically said that he will withdraw from the Paris Agreement and promote fossil fuels. That will affect Africa, and specifically Kenya, because the current president of Kenya, President Ruto, has been very keen in matters to do with climate change. Kenya has invested a lot of money, as well as has gotten a lot of donors in projects that are supporting climate resilience and just making sure that climate change effects are reduced. For example, going for carbon credits and etc. So if President Trump steps into office, all these efforts will be scrapped off, and Kenya will have to look for other donors except America that will try as much as possible to invest in climate-related projects as well as the climate agenda. Africa is also affected negatively with climate change. So if the US is going to invest in fossil fuels, is going to encourage other global leaders to invest in fossil fuels, and Africa is going to lose, Kenya included, with drought and heavy rains, as we have witnessed. Lastly, investment pullbacks, as we saw in the last regime. President Trump has been very, very categorical in reducing donor aid. And in the last regime, he did that by reducing donor aid in terms of PEPFAR. There was reduced investment in PEPFAR, and PEPFAR is the aid that assists people with HIV and AIDS, and there was a lack of medicine for persons with HIV and AIDS here in Kenya and across Africa. So if President Trump steps foot in the office, we are going to see a change, also in investment pullbacks that are going to affect Africans across the board.